Welcome to our webinar on Remote Interpreting 101. This webinar is presented by Luisa Gracia and Claudia Azar. Let's talk about us a little bit. My name is Luisa Gracia. I'm certified court interpreter in Washington State and also in Spain. I am an interpreter representative in Washington State Supreme Court Interpreter Commission, and I am the interpreter coordinator in Seattle Municipal Court, where we are implementing remote interpreting. Now I will allow my colleague Claudia Azar to introduce herself.
Hello, my name is Claudia Azar, and I'm a Spanish interpreter. And I have been interpreting for about 20 years. I'm certified by the state of Washington and the federal government. And my background is business administration, economics, and social justice. I am originally from Mexico. So the reason why I was very excited when Luisa invited me to participate in this webinar is because I actually started working in remote interpretation in 2009. And I would love to share insights with you about this relatively new way of interpreting. We are going to explore the many things you will have to think about before you start doing what you know best, which is interpreting. This is a new tool for your toolbox, and believe it or not, it is here to stay. Some of the new numbers show that meetings online save about 30%. So we're going to see this mode of interpretation in the near future. So let's start. And first of all, I know that we have acronyms for everything. So of course, we also have acronyms for interpreters. So I'm going to share with you the new ones that you're going to be hearing around now that we are doing remote interpretation. Next. As you can see, the usual interpretation that we're all used to is the on-site interpretation, OSI, but we have a series of acronyms that you're going to be hearing more and more. So this is just for your new glossary of new acronyms. We have ROI, which is remote interpretation, the old-fashioned OPI, which is the over-the-phone interpretation. RSI is the remote simultaneous interpretation. VRI is the video remote interpretation that can be consecutive or simultaneous. We're going to be focusing in that modality. And then the IDP, which is the interpreter delivery platform. So now I'm going to ask Luisa to start presenting the part of the legal framework and business practices.
Thank you, Claudia. So remote interpreting, as you know, this is a hot topic these days, and it's being used in many venues, not only in courts, but also in other settings like medical, social services, you name it. Courts have to abide by the General Rule 11.3, which is the rule that talks specifically about remote telephonic at this point for non-evidentiary hearings. Also, courts are required to abide by RCW 2.42 and GR 11.2. RCW 2.42 requires the courts to retain the services of credentialed interpreters. And of course, since you are interpreters yourselves, now you know that GR 11.2 is the code of conduct for judiciary interpreters. The advantages of working with this modality of remote interpreting is that you can be anywhere in the world as long as you are in a quiet place. You don't have to drive, you don't have to put up with traffic jams, and you get to stay home. And of course, we're working always with the same three modes as we are normally working in person, like site translation, consecutive, and simultaneous. Now let's talk a little bit about business practices. So first of all, you will receive a request of services. And the request should look something like this. It will include the following information: the language, the LEP name, case number, hearing type, courtroom, time, date, of course. And in this case, it's highlighted, as you see that there is highlighted in yellow, is remote. After receiving this information, you have to make sure that you receive the invitation for the remote interpreting event. This invitation could include a link for you to click and join on a web platform. It could include a telephone number, or it could have a combination of both, the link and the telephone. Make sure you receive these right after you talk to the coordinators. Also, once you have received that information, make sure to review the information yet again and ask for additional information that you may need to carry out your job professionally. So ask for the documents needed for the hearing, for example, and also ask for the name of the parties. LEP, attorney, prosecuting attorney, judge, case number, charges, or any other issues that may arise. Many times, just keep this in mind, the court will not know all the information in advance, so you can ask for this information when the court calls you to provide the services the day of. Also, on the day of the hearing or the service day, you should carry out pre-conference, which is a very simple and very succinct conversation with the LEP. Just introduce yourself, let them know that you are the interpreter, and ask them to communicate a third party, either their attorney or the judge, whether they can understand you or not. And of course, make sure you mention that you are going to interpret everything. This part is extremely important because sometimes you may be assigned to a wrong LEP. Sometimes, for example, like a Spanish-speaking sounding name may belong to a person that speaks Tagalog, and because some of the court staff do not know, they may assign it to a Spanish interpreter. That happens sometimes. So make sure you carry out this little pre-conference. Now, these are the main blocks or topics that we will talk about during this presentation, and we're going to break them down for you.
Okay, so first of all, we're going to talk about the equipment. This is a very important part of this new modality. Next. We're going to concentrate in different points like the investment of doing this type of work, how you're going to learn, the devices you will need, and the connectivity that you need to have. Next. So why do I say that it's an investment? Because it is. It is going to cost you because you know that technology is expensive. But if you don't have good technology, you're not going to be able to perform your work professionally. So do remember that as freelancers, if we have a business, this type of expenses can be tax deductible. So there is their silver lining. Now, when we talk about learning, this is paramount. It is great if you have all the technology, but you also need to know how to use your devices and how to test them. And you're not going to use your devices and test your devices on the job. You're going to have to do it beforehand. So when you go to interpret, all that is ironed out. Next. So when I talk about devices, what do I mean with that? Well, anything that you might need to interpret, your telephone, computer, headset, microphone, loudspeakers, etc. We're going to talk in detail in a minute. And then the connectivity that I was talking about, the Wi-Fi, the internet, what do you need, a line, etc. So we're going to dive in now. Next. Number one is the phone. You would think that nowadays we really don't need a line. But I can tell you that when I started doing remote interpretation In my contract, I had to sign that I was going to have 2 landlines. I even had a client who asked me to fax them, imagine how long it was, copies of my utility bills to prove that I had landlines. Landlines are great because even if there's a storm, an issue with the internet, the satellites die or whatever, the phones will continue to work. So they're very important. But with time, cell phones have become very good. So nowadays, they don't actually require you to have phone lines. You can also have a cell phone, but you have to make sure that you are in a good area where your phone will work fine. Now, if you see in this slide, I'm telling you that you need to have 2 phone lines. And you're going to say, well, that's exaggeration. It's not. So keep that in mind when we continue talking about this. But the idea, when you're going to start with all the items that you need, you should have 2 phone lines. If you only have one and you cannot afford it or you don't have the ability to have a second, you should consider things like Google Voice, which acts like a regular phone, but it's through your computer. Next. Another thing that you're going to need is a computer. Obviously, we're talking about platforms. If you have a computer that is older than 3 years, it's time to say goodbye and get a new one. It has to be a new computer. And ideally, if you have more screens, you're going to be better off. In this image, you see a guy with 3 screens. I personally like 3 screens. I will tell you a little bit in a few minutes. But if you're going to have the platform in one of the screens and you're going to be paying attention to that, it will be nice to have additional screens to check your glossary, to look for something online, or to have the documents that you're going to use handy. So keep that in mind. Ideally, you should have more than one, but at least one, and it should be new. Next. A lot of people ask me about headphones. And the headphones are a must. I tell you, it just makes a total difference when you are working remotely. And when we talk about headphones, we're not talking about earbuds. Earbuds are not good for you. Sometimes people use them, they're painful and you cannot hear as well. And here, you're also going to need 2. So I suggest that the best way to find the right earphones is to go to a store and test them. You need to keep in mind that they have to be compatible with your computer because we want to make sure that it works with the good quality and recording quality. And also remember that if you have the microphone with your headset, you will have hands-free, which is awesome. And also, they are very good because they are, when you find the ideal ones, and I can tell you, you have to invest heavily in your earphones, you need to have all the possibility to have noise gates. The noise gates are kind of like filters that make sure that they're only going to capture your voice and the background noise will not be so prevalent. You need to have also acoustic shock protection because these are your jewels. Your ears are your jewels. That's how you can make a living. You have to protect them. So you don't want to have any issues with your ears because they hurt. So it's a good idea to invest in good headsets. I don't recommend that you get Bluetooth earphones because they sometimes don't work. And there's always like a tiny lag time between what's been said and what your earphone tells you. And when you are working, doing this type of simultaneous and having a lot of things going on, you don't want your earphones to hesitate. So I discourage Bluetooth. I think that the old-fashioned cord is the best thing that you can do. And again, just go and look for them. Look for things that are comfortable because you're going to have them on for hours. And don't forget that you will need 2. So when you're at the store looking for good earphones, think about the possibility of trying both at the same time because you will need to have one in one ear and one in the other ear sometimes. So if they can work together, that's great. Next. Now, a standalone mic is always great too, because it really is good quality and your voice sounds great with it, but it depends on what you're going to do. I personally prefer to have it with my headset, but it's up to you. Again, as someone who has experience in this type of sound systems places, they might be able to give you a better advice, but you need to look into it, and it's not going to be an inexpensive proposition. Next. Now, sometimes things are great, but you still have difficulty. Remember, you are not communicating face to face. There are some challenges that you're going to encounter. And so it is important that you know that there are ways that you can make your work easier. So amplifiers, they are just a little piece of hardware that allows you to listen to better quality audio. So if your headphones do not have a good digital to analog converter, you can get an amplifier if you need it. Now, some of them are very inexpensive, in the 20 range. But for example, you could also have a headphone amplifier like the black one, which is like $99. Or you can go to the state-of-the-art amplifier, which is awesome, active noise cancellation, jitter elimination, and the whole 9 yards, but it's almost $250. But again, that will really make your work easier. So think about all these things. Again, it is an investment, but it's going to make you sound great. Next. Now, the connectivity is very important. Now, when we talk about connectivity, of course, it's Wi-Fi, but you have to understand that the best way to have your computer connected is if you use the Ethernet, which is connecting your computer directly to your internet system at home on the wall, like the old-fashioned phone jack, which is that little icon on the top right side of this house. But sometimes, although Wi-Fi is discouraged, if you have a very good Wi-Fi system, or if you have like little Orbeez or things like that, that really bounce the waves all over your house, you can use Wi-Fi. But again, that could make your sound a little unstable. So if you can connect to Ethernet, that's great. Wi-Fi, if it is very good, you can use it. Sometimes those things don't work. I can tell you an experience. One day I was at home interpreting in a conference remotely, and the neighbor decided to cut something next door, and he cut off my internet. So I obviously freaked out, but I had my phones next to me, so I was able to carry on with my phones blind because I couldn't turn on my computer because my Wi-Fi didn't work. And so I used a plan B, which was a hotspot, like the one you see below, which is a little Wi-Fi system that connects to the satellite, and it gave me internet. So it's not the ideal, but it really saved the day. So it's always good to have plan A, plan B, and plan C, because the last thing you want is to let a lot of people hanging because you disappear somewhere. So think about these things as well. Next. So when we talk about all these little equipment items, your earphones, your hotspot, everything, again, it is an investment and you don't have to buy everything at once. But I can tell you that when you're in front of your computer, you've already said yes to an assignment and you're ready to go. If you have this table set this way, it's definitely going to make your job easier. Next. So it is very good to have like a little checklist of the things that you need. When you go to your office, double check your Wi-Fi. Remember, Wi-Fi is very important, and sometimes there are areas in the state where maybe it's not very strong. The ideal, it should be like 1.5, but verify what you have. Make sure that your connectivity works. And if you're going to have to use your phone, which we're going to be talking about in a few minutes, make sure that your batteries are charged. Make sure that all your plug links are corrected. Your computer is totally charged. Ideally, you should have a desktop, but most of us don't have them anymore. So your laptop should be fully charged and your cords nearby. So have a little checklist of all the things that you need to do so you don't get all rattled and nervous before your meeting starts. Next. I love this slide because it really explains what I'm going to try to convey during the entire presentation, which is multitasking, because you have to think about a lot of details when you're interpreting remotely. So I want you to think about this and see all these little things, all these little icons, because this is how we feel sometimes when we're about to start an assignment. And so the checklist will help you to calm down, to relax, and make sure that everything's ready before you start. Next. This is a slide about telephonic equipment. A lot of courts have been doing telephonic equipment for years. Not so much for Spanish interpreters because we are everywhere, but some interpreters have been using this system for a long period of time and they have a lot of experience. So let's just remember that when you are going to be using the phone, it's been said in the past that they discourage cell phones. Again, a lot of people don't have landlines anymore. So if you have a good cell phone, that's fine. Again, just make sure that you have good earphones. And remember that you're not going to be able to see the faces. You're not going to be able to have a lot of contextual cues, and that you have to be using good equipment to be able to listen and to concentrate in the work that you're going to do. Next. And then we go to this important part, and we're all very interested about, which is the use of platforms. There are different platforms. Most of the ones that you're going to be working with are the ones that you see at the top: WebEx, Zoom, Adobe Connect. And some of them do not have the interpreter feature. In fact, none of them do. In this slide, we only see Kudo. There are some beautiful platforms that have interpreter feature, but they're very expensive. So most likely, clients are not going to use them. So then we are with Zoom, that has its issues, but it does offer an interpreter feature, although it's flawed because it doesn't allow to have the ability for you to listen to your team interpreter when you're working. So there are some things that we need to know to be able to get around these situations. WebEx is a fantastic platform, but it doesn't have that feature. And in the next few slides, we're going to talk about what do you do when your client offers you a job with a platform that doesn't have the interpreter feature, and how do you deal with it? Because it is doable. Next. Lisa is going to talk to you about the platforms right now.